Hi, I'm Fred with Quality One Engravers. I'm going to give you a real quick seminar on doing cutter sharpening. Hopefully it'll all go well. It's all done kind of impromptu. Let me just show you the tools that I'm working with here. I have cutters, of course, to sharpen. These happen to be 11/64s. And right now it's got an 11/64 collet in here. This is a comparator that I'm going to use. And typically you use a comparator for cutters that are 10 thousandths. Actually, I use it mostly for 15 all the way up to full-size cutters. And then I use this 10x loop with a real expensive retina on it that I go down to my 5s and 10s that I look at. And these are other things that you need, is some of these little cheap magnifier loops. And here's a little instruction sheet that's going to come with it. And keep in mind, one of the things that I've done is everything that I've learned on cutter sharpening has been basically through trial and error. And I did get a couple of tips from some people about sharpening by eye rather than using the machine. But anyways, these are the numbers I came up with. They seem to work pretty good. You can always modify it. I like my 0 to 0.05 to 0.20s to be at a 48 degree included angle, and then 25 and up to be a 60 included angle. So, and then the settings that I put it on is the 21 mark and the 25 mark. So, and I'll show you those marks. It's a little hard to see on here because there's a slight line, and right now I have it at because my eyes are not great, I use a loop, and this is right now it's at the 25 mark. So the 25 mark is going to give me a 60 degree cutter. So I'm going to take a cutter here that's hasn't been adjusted. Here's another item that you need, is this little Scotch-Brite pad to kind of clean off the cutter. Oftentimes you get a cutter that's pretty ugly looking. Hey, Lauren. You can see this is a pretty rowdy cutter, but it's a good sample. So what I'm doing is this is where you'll come up to the part. You'll slide this in the collet, push it in. This is the little finger tab. I'm pinching it together. Oops, I have to have this little catch in place. I tighten and then flip this away. So you can see if I were to run it into the wheel, it would hit the wheel. So I adjust it away so I'm away from the wheel. Now it's already pre-adjusted such that when it goes down, this stops it. And then likewise, I have it set so the travel of this arm is only about a ½ inch in each direction. So it's already preset, and that's what this adjustment does right here. I've got it tightened pretty tight. So this one changes the degrees, and this one puts it on this arm. Okay? So, and another thing that I've got, if you look underneath the table here, I've got a little foot switch, which is a momentary foot switch. And the reason for that is that the motors on these are very expensive, and the bearings are very expensive, and there's no reason to run it. And they're also noisy, so there's no reason to run it any longer than what you need it to run. So when I press on it with my foot, I can get it going. So you can see I left quite a bit of clearance there. So I'm going to take the cutter, and you can usually tell if everything's good by when you're cranked over, the cutter is about with the flat facing up, not perfectly straight. So I'm moving the cutter back and forth, and I'm approaching the wheel with my left hand. I'm tightening this screw, and I'm doing it relatively slowly. And the reason I'm going back and forth is so you keep your wheel nice and flat. And you'll hear an audible change in the sound shortly here. So you can hear it now start touching. And if you look real close, you can see the wheel has actually done some sharpening. So I'm going to come back to it. Again, I keep going back and forth, and I'm just barely cranking the wheel behind me. Now on this cutter, I'm going to take it down to a point, but under normal circumstances, you don't have to do that. You just take it down a little bit smaller than the tip size, but because I can see the back of this cutter, it has been ruined by somebody, I kind of need to go a little bit further. And sometimes right at the end, I give a little tiny crank in and then do a swoop on it to get a nice... So I'm really good up to this point, but up above it's a little bit ratty, but fortunately you're only cutting at the tip, so this is good enough. So I flip it back, click it so it's locked, I unlock the collet, pull the cutter out. Okay, so now I have a sharpened cutter, but of course I need to tip it. So what I do is I tip it by eye. I hold the cutter 7 degrees down and 20 degrees away. So let me polish this a little so it's a little easier to see. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold it 20 degrees down and 7 degrees away. So this would be perfectly straight, so 7 degrees away from me and 20 degrees down. And it doesn't really need to be that perfect, but once you get the hang of it. Now the other thing that you have to do is make sure that the flat is straight up, and when you move it into the wheel, you have to be a straight trajectory at it. So you can see the flat is straight up, and I take a dive at it. After you get good at it, you'll be able to hit your mark almost every time and even guess at what this is. This is between a 25 and a 30. So I'm going to take my comparator and make sure you have something white to look at. And I need a lot of light. So I'm going to take my comparator and this cutter is exactly about a 28. It's just under 30. Yeah, it's right at a 28. So let's say that I wanted to take this cutter down to a 25. What I can do is I can take it and put it back into the sharpener, close it up, flip the arm up, flip this away so I can rotate, come back in. Now remember, be careful, it may be in a different position. So now what I need to do is approach the wheel slowly. And you can hear that it now is making a sound. Now remember, you're only taking 3/1000ths off the tip. And that was a pretty, quite a bit of sound coming from it hitting the wheel. So we may have gone a little below 25. Not much, but. So it's actually about a 24 now. So let's say I want to move it up a little bit. This you'll have to get a little bit of practice doing.
Charlie.
You'll have to get a little practice. Right now it's a 24 and I want it to be a 25. So I want to match that angle as close as I can and approach it very, very slowly. And yet just barely feel it touch. And sure enough, now it's a perfect 25. So let's go ahead and see the same exact tool engraved. I've got a machine all set up, so if you follow me, just leave it right. Okay, I've got a job set up. I'm going to go ahead and send it. It's just ABC. One of the other tools that I'm going to use is this little cutter length adjuster so that I don't have to do a Z-set on it. I'm going to tighten this up. And you can see this is that same tool with the marks on it, so we're not subbing anything in on you. Okay. And my controller says that the job is there, and all I have to do is just, let me send it to home, is just hit start. So I'm going to stop the engraving. I just happened to pick a spot that was right over existing engraving, unfortunately, but you can pretty much see. You can see how nice and clean the engraving is. Even though it's a little bit shallow, I can set it a little bit deeper and hit start and have it continue. And there's your first cutter, sharpen. Hope this helps.